Hello, welcome to the programme. Tens of thousands of people in Myanmar have gathered in Yangon to attend the first Mass to be held by Pope Francis. So far on his trip, the Pope has not publicly referred to the country's persecuted Rohingya Muslim minority by name. Myanmar has an estimated 200,000 Catholics. Earlier, Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who's been criticised for failing to speak out against the treatment of the Rohingya, many of whom are now living in refugee camps in neighbouring Bangladesh. The Pope has already spoken of ethnic groups but refused to refer to the persecuted Rohingya Muslim minority by name. The Pope said peace can only be achieved through justice and respect for human rights. Well, our South East Asia correspondent Jonathan Head is following the Mass in Yangon.
Well, this is the biggest Mass of the Pope's four-day tour here in Myanmar. He was in the capital, Naypyidaw, a rather sterile place. It's only been in existence for 10 years. That's the seat of power. And where he made his keynote speech yesterday, met Aung San Suu Kyi. He's already met the Armed Forces commander as well. It's given a very political tone to this tour, but this is the moment it becomes pastoral and spiritual. The Pope has done his classic tour around the crowd behind me in a sort of Pope-mobile. The crowds aren't as big as I would have expected, or some might have done. They've actually got a lot more space here, but there's probably 10 to 20,000 people behind me. You have to remember the Christian, particularly the Catholic minority, is very small, and a lot of them had to travel very long distances to get here. There's a very enthusiastic, very joyful atmosphere, and people, most of them, were able to get a very good view of him as he went around, reaching out to them, smiling. The Mass has started, the Pope is on stage, and we expect he's going to speak later on in the day. He's got a meeting with the Buddha, which is very important because Buddhism is the majority religion, and Buddhist monks have led the ultra-nationalist mood that's proved so intolerant of Muslims in general and Rohingyas in particular. But we know now that the Pope is avoiding any controversial public comments. What we don't know is what he's saying privately to a full range of people that he's meeting.
Yes, he's had a very difficult balancing act, hasn't he?
He has. I would argue he's balanced it, although I think there will be a lot of disappointment from Rohingya advocates and human rights groups who want to make a point of highlighting the plight of the Rohingyas because it's so awful. It's not just that they've suffered terrible abuses and been driven out of their homes, but also they've been subjected to institutionalization, a form of apartheid, for many, many years. And they feel that it would have been good if the Pope could have actually used the word Rohingya, which is very controversial here. The government and the majority don't accept it. On the other hand, had he done that, he would certainly have got an angry reaction. Here in Myanmar, they don't recognise the Rohingya crisis in the way the rest of the world is reporting it. It's very much seen here as a deep problem in Rakhine State. They now have militants there, that their security forces were attacked, and everyone's rallying around both the army and Aung San Suu Kyi. So had the Pope chosen to speak out, he would have had probably a hostile reaction from some and probably would have closed doors, at least in terms of reaching out to key leaders here.
Jonathan Head there in Yangon. And there is more on the Pope's tour of Myanmar on our website, bbc.com/news, or you can download the BBC News app. In the last few minutes, North Korea's state TV has claimed its military has achieved what it called an historic moment with the launch of a new intercontinental ballistic missile. The news programme claimed the missile was technically capable of reaching the United States. The report also pictured leader Kim Jong-un at his desk. The missile, named Hwasong-15, flew 950 kilometres for 53 minutes while reaching an altitude of 4 kilometres, according to a statement read by a television presenter. Leaders in South Korea, Japan and the United States have condemned the test. Our correspondent Paul Adams has more now from Seoul.
This is the first test by the North Koreans since mid-September, and it comes, after this long pause in which people had started to wonder whether there was something in the fact that we hadn't had a missile test in such a long time. Well, in the early hours of the morning, in the dead of night, Kim Jong-un gave us a rather emphatic answer.
After 2 months without a test, North Korea is back at the top of President Trump's agenda.
A missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only do that. We will take care of it.
This is the 23rd North Korean missile test this year, the first since mid-September. It took off in the early hours of the morning from Pyeongchang, north of the capital Pyongyang. It flew east for about 1,000 kilometers, landing after 50 minutes in the Sea of Japan. American officials believe this was an intercontinental ballistic missile and say it flew higher than any previous test. In response, South Korea conducted a precision strike missile test of its own.
The bottom line is it's a continued effort to build a ballistic missile threat that endangers world peace, regional peace, and certainly the United States.
Thank you, General, and we will take care of that situation. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has been seen in recent days visiting largely economic ventures. In the absence of fresh missile tests, observers wondered if his focus had shifted. This, it seems, was wishful thinking. Here in Seoul, the president has convened a meeting of his National Security Council. Most experts still think that North Korea needs 2 to 3 years to complete its nuclear weapons program. Today, a government minister said he wouldn't be surprised if Kim Jong-un finished the job within the next year. North Korea, he said, was developing its nuclear weapons much faster than anyone. The United States has stepped up pressure on North Korea throughout the year. Military exercises the most visible sign of Donald Trump's uncompromising approach. Officials believe the pressure is making life harder for the North Korean leader, but Kim Jong-un seems determined to achieve his nuclear ambitions and unwilling to talk in the meantime. Plenty of reaction here in the region. Shinzo Abe, Japan's Prime Minister, calling for a meeting of the UN Security Council. And in the last hour or so, we've been hearing from the Korean President, Moon Jae-in. He said that this is provocation. He's accused North Korea of military adventurism, says peace with the North will not be possible unless this stops. I think what's alarming people about this test, as the experts analyse it, is the fact that it was at this very high trajectory, suggesting to those experts that almost the entire continental US is now within range of North Korean ballistic missiles. That's, of course, not the same as saying that North Korea yet has the ability to deliver a nuclear warhead to the continental United States. That is still the bit of this nuclear program that's yet to be completed. But as the South Korean unification minister said yesterday, he thinks that it is just possible that that final leap, putting an effective nuclear warhead on top of an effective ballistic missile, is something that North Korea could complete within the next 12 months or so.
Paul Adams reporting there from Seoul. Let's take a look at some more stories making the news now. And the Senate Democratic leader in the United States says Democrats and Republicans need to come to an agreement on the budget to avoid a shutdown. Senator Chuck Schumer was speaking after he and Representative Nancy Pelosi pulled out of a scheduled meeting with President Trump to discuss the issue. Mr. Trump says there is a fundamental disagreement over tax that needs to be addressed. One of the most prominent Saudis being held in an anti-corruption drive is reported to have been freed after 3 weeks. Prince Muteb, once seen as a leading contender to the throne, was arrested on the orders of the Crown Prince. Officials say he has now been released after agreeing to pay more than $1 billion. A graphic video of Japanese fishermen harpooning whales in the Southern Ocean has been released by the Australian government after the anti-whaling group Sea Shepherd won a Freedom of Information battle. The video was filmed by Australian officials nearly 10 years ago, but Canberra kept it hidden for fear of damaging international relations. The World Health Organization is warning that progress made to eradicate malaria could be damaged unless more funding is made available. Their latest report provides a status update on the fight against the disease, with experts saying targets to cut infection by 90% by 2030 will be missed unless budgets are increased. Andrew Plant has more.
Malaria, spread by mosquitoes, and in some countries wipe out malaria. A new report, though, says progress is stalling due to underfunding. Worldwide, the Prevention and Eradication Programme got $2.7 billion last year. experts say that's well short of the money they need.
The long-term trend is still a good one, with numbers of cases and deaths declining very significantly. But we do have to be concerned about the plateauing of that reduction in the last year or two. And really, it's a reminder to us that the job is far from done with malaria. We really do, as a global community, need to keep on focusing on it and actually accelerate a lot of our efforts to really finish the job.
Last year saw more than 2 million new infections across 91 countries. Half of them, like TB and HIV, killed twice as many last year. The hope is that one day malaria, like smallpox, could be a disease of the past. Insecticide-treated bed nets are the most effective way to stop malaria. Spraying walls with insecticide is also popular. While net use has risen, the use of insecticide spray has gone down. The fear is without more money, the gains made against the disease could start to slip back. In recent years, 7 countries have been certified malaria-free, including the Maldives and Sri Lanka. It's hoped many more will be free of the disease over the next decade, but scientists say that can only happen with more to fight malaria. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
Let's stay with this then. I spoke to Dr. Mark Jacobs earlier, a director of the World Health Organization's Western Pacific region. He was in Manila.
Well, there's certainly some concerning information in this year's report, but it's not at all concerning information by any stretch. Long-term trend is still a good one, with numbers of cases and deaths declining very significantly. But we do have to be concerned about the plateauing of that reduction in the last year or two. And really, it's a reminder to us that the job is far from done with malaria. We really do, as a community, need to keep on focusing on it and actually accelerate a lot of our efforts to really finish the job.
Is it all about funding?
No, certainly one of the concerns, one of the practical concerns we have is about the plateauing of the funding, the levelling off of the funding in recent years. But actually, that it's also about how we go about tackling it. Now, one of the fundamental challenges we have is that services for malaria, whether that's prevention services or diagnosis services or treatment services, aren't reaching everybody that needs them. Now, of course, partly that's a funding issue. It's also about how health systems operate. It's about how these programs operate. But until we really come to grips with that there's still big gaps in coverage of those services, we won't hit those ambitious targets for malaria.
And I suppose it is going to be the poorest people in the poorest countries who pay the price for that. Well, often the people who can't get access to the services, or the services they can't reach them, that's not the only challenge they face. Often they can be living in more remote parts of their countries, or they might be in minority populations, or they might be very mobile. And so, the malaria aren't reaching them. It may be that TB services also aren't reaching them fully, or maternal and child health services aren't reaching them. So this is a fundamental challenge for health systems more broadly, not just for the malaria parts of those health systems. When we talk about malaria prevention, in practical terms, what does that come down to?
The biggest part of the prevention of malaria is bed nets, insecticide-treated bed nets, which are highly effective. There's also the ability to use residual spraying inside houses. So they're the two main things, but the huge focus of the current program is on making sure that people can get access to good quality.
Dr. Mark Jacobs speaking to me earlier. Do stay with us here on BBC News. There's plenty still to come, including Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are to be married next May. The venue, St George's Chapel in Windsor. Welcome back. You're watching BBC News. The latest headlines. Pope Francis celebrates Mass for the first time in Myanmar. And North Korea announces it's test-fired another ballistic missile, triggering condemnation from Washington, Tokyo and Seoul. Thousands of visitors are stranded on the Indonesian island of Bali after aircraft was stopped from using its only airport for a second day over fears a volcano may erupt. Mount Agung is sending gas, ash and smoke thousands of metres into the air. From Bali, Hull Griffiths sent this report.
With ash billowing overhead and tremors growing underground, Mount Agung's eruption shows no sign of slowing. Thick, muddy flows known as lahars are already spilling from the surface. They're dangerous, but not as devastating as the red-hot lava which could follow. In the mountain shadow, they've been preparing for months. Everyone knows the drill. These children have been reassured they will be safe, as long as the evacuation plan is followed. For the thousands forced from their homes 2 months ago when the tremors started, the wait has been unbearable, and there's no way of knowing when it will end.
I have 2 young children. What will we do?
The impact of the eruption's already spreading. With more than 800 flights cancelled, the only way in and out is by boat. For Kerry Rani, it feels like a good time to leave.
It's quite scary. It's pretty close at the minute. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether it's due to erupt or it's in the middle of erupting.
But some here are determined to stick to everyday life, whatever the risks. This flower seller lives within the exclusion zone, but is refusing to leave.
Won't see.
She'll run if the lava comes, she laughs.
Through the day, the island's been hit by tropical storms and blackouts, just adding to the sense of disruption and unease as everyone here waits to see how this eruption will end. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, Bali.
On to some more stories now, and at least 2 people have died, with 3 others in a critical condition after a car bomb exploded outside the Yemeni Finance Ministry offices in Aden. Officials say they believe there are more casualties at the scene of the blast, but they're unable to reach them due to an exchange on fire. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. A jury in the United States has acquitted a Libyan militant of murder, but convicted on lesser terrorism charges in connection with an attack on the US consulate in Benghazi in 2012. Ahmed Abu Khattala had been 13 charges but was acquitted on all but 4. And Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta says he'll work to reunite the country following his controversial re-election last month. Mr Kenyatta was inaugurated for his 2nd term on Tuesday, despite continuing opposition protests. He won a repeat election held in October with 98% of the vote after the opposition boycotted the poll. We're starting to get details of the upcoming royal wedding of Prince Harry and the American actress Meghan Markle. Kensington Palace announced they will marry in May at Windsor Castle. Ms Markle will be confirmed into the Church of England before the service. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell has the details.
They have, in the words of their spokesman, been overwhelmed by the amount of support they've received from Britain and elsewhere in the world to the news of their engagement. And now Harry and Meghan are starting to organise the wedding, leading the process for all aspects of the ceremony themselves, according to their officials. As they do so, other members of the royal family have been expressing their happiness at the news of their engagement.
William and I are absolutely thrilled. It's such exciting news. It's a really happy time for any couple, and we wish them all the best and hope they enjoy this happy moment.
The first big decision in terms of the wedding planning is the venue. It will take place inside Windsor Castle in the historic St George's Chapel. The month on the invitations will be May. A precise date has still to be decided. The 15th century chapel, festooned with the banners of the Knights of the Garter, is where Harry was christened. The disadvantage is its size. It can seat only 800 guests, fewer than half the capacity of Westminster Abbey. It is, though, a more intimate setting. It was where the marriage of the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Quest in 2005 after their wedding in a registry office. Aside from wedding preparations, Meghan will be applying for British citizenship. As she made clear in yesterday's interview, she wants to get to know Britain better.
I think in these beginning few months and now being boots on the ground in the UK, I'm excited to just really get to know more about the different communities here, smaller organizations who are working on the same causes that I've always been passionate about.
That process of getting to know her new country will start this Friday in Nottingham. The city will witness the first official engagement of the new royal team, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
The upper house of the Australian Parliament has approved a draft law paving the way for the legalisation of gay marriage. The law is expected to be passed by the lower house of Parliament after Australians voted overwhelmingly in favour of the measure in a nationwide postal survey. Now, here's something surprising. Space is filling up with junk. Old bits of rockets, fragments of spacecrafts, even old satellites are all up there, and the amount of rubbish just keeps on growing. Now, a British team is hoping to solve the problem with a spacecraft that could grab some of the space junk and bring it back to Earth. Our science correspondent Rebecca Morell explains.
3, 2, 1, lift off.
Blasting off. Been launching into space. But what goes up rarely comes down, and space has become crowded with junk. The Remove Debris spacecraft could be the answer. The world's first attempt to test how we can clean up celestial clutter. It will see if it's possible to snare a satellite in a net and review how effective a harpoon is. It will then bring everything back down, burning up as it enters the Earth's atmosphere. It's been assembled in Surrey and has cost £1 million. This is the last chance to see it before it's packed up for its launch early next year.
This is the Remove Debris platform. It's going to be one of the world's first missions to actually demonstrate cleaning up space junk. This mission is incredibly important. We have technologies on here that have never been demonstrated in space before, and it's urgent that we actually launch this mission now so that we can develop these technologies for use in the future.
Since the early days of exploration, the area around the Earth has grown more obsessed. It's estimated there are about 7,500 tonnes of junk, made up of old bits of rocket, fragments from defunct spacecraft, even tools dropped by an astronaut. Scientists believe there are now 500,000 pieces of debris the size of a marble or bigger, and each piece has the potential to do some serious damage. Last year, the International Space Station was hit. This chip in a window was caused when it was struck by a tiny fleck of paint. But the bigger pieces of junk are a more pressing problem. This European satellite, the size of a double-decker bus, suddenly stopped working in 2012. Since then, it's been circling the Earth, threatening other key satellites in its path.
The problem is going to grow. It's going to grow because it's going to take place in the orbital environment. We're going to lose the satellites that we rely on. That's going to be costly to us, it's going to be costly to the future generation.
All eyes are now trained on the Remove Debris spacecraft. If the technology works, the hope is future missions can be scaled up and the space cleanup can begin. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
That's the way it's looking. We're online at bbc.com/news, and I'm at Duncan Golestani on Twitter. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Bye for now.